At exactly 12:17 in the afternoon, the man in the yellow vest stopped taking money, and the line of cars coming off the county road suddenly slowed to a confused crawl. By 1 o'clock, the first tow truck rolled through my gate. By 4 in the afternoon, 114 cars had been lifted off my land one by one, while the president of the Palmetto Ridge HOA stood in the middle of my hay field staring at the scene like a man who had just watched his future collapse in real time. Because earlier that morning, while I was 8 miles away buying livestock feed, his little community parking operation had collected more than $3,000 on my property. And now every single car that paid that money was sitting on the back of a tow truck. My name is Anderson Briggs. I'm 62 years old, retired, and for 30 years I practiced commercial real estate law in Charleston, South Carolina. I didn't retire because I hated the work. I retired because after 3 decades of contracts, disputes, and property battles, I finally realized something simple. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life arguing about land. I wanted to live on it. So I bought 106 acres outside Greenville County. 60 acres of hay fields stretching out in front of the house, 40 acres leased to a cattle farmer behind it, and a white farmhouse built in 1951 with crooked windows and a porch that faces west so the entire sky turns gold in the evenings. It's the kind of place where the air smells like cut grass and dust. The kind of place where nothing important is supposed to happen. And for 5 years, nothing did. My eastern fence line runs along the edge of a suburban development called Palmetto Ridge, 194 homes, neat sidewalks, identical mailboxes, the kind of place with HOA newsletters and seasonal decorations. For those 5 years, the relationship between us was simple. They stayed on their side of the fence. I stayed on mine. Occasionally, someone walking their dog would wave. I waved back. No problems. Then Victor Slade became HOA president. Victor was the kind of man who believed every empty space represented a missed opportunity. He had worked in hospitality management before retiring, which meant he looked at land the way hotel managers look at empty ballrooms. And used space meant lost revenue. The opportunity arrived in September when the Upstate Harvest Festival rolled into town. It's a big regional craft fair, thousands of visitors, handmade goods, food trucks, music. The fairgrounds sit about 2 miles from my property. And every year the same problem happened. Too many cars. Not enough parking. Victor apparently saw my hay field from the neighborhood fence line and had what he probably believed was a brilliant idea. Overflow parking. $20 per vehicle. No permission asked. No agreement signed. Just assumption. And that's how, on a quiet Saturday morning in September, I drove back from the feed store and saw something that stopped me cold on the county road. Orange traffic cones lined the entrance to my field. A hand-painted sign said, "Event parking, $20." And a man in a yellow vest was standing beside a folding table, collecting cash from a line of cars, turning off the road, guiding them into neat rows across my hay. For a moment, I just sat there in my truck. Not angry, not confused, just observing. 30 years in property law does something to your brain. When you see a situation like that, you don't panic. You start thinking in steps. I parked on the shoulder and walked over to the man collecting money. He smiled politely the way someone does when they believe everything is running smoothly. "Morning," he said. I asked who had authorized parking on this field. "The Palmetto Ridge HOA," he said cheerfully. "We arranged it with the landowner." I told him calmly, "I am a landowner." The smile vanished from his face like someone flipped a switch. I told him to stop collecting money and call whoever hired him. Then I walked back to my truck and made my first phone call. Gerald Oates. Gerald had been my law partner in Charleston for 20 years, the kind of attorney you trust, not just with your cases, but with your instincts. He answered on the second ring. I described what I was looking at. There was a pause, then a short laugh. "Anderson," he said, "you already know exactly what to do." "I do," I said. "I just wanted to hear your voice before I start. Call me when it's over." Then I hung up and started executing the plan. First call, Greenville County Sheriff's Office. Unauthorized commercial operation on private property. Second call, Upstate Recovery Towing Service. I asked how many trucks they could send within 2 hours. 4, the owner said. Perfect. Third call, Dennis Ford, a licensed property appraiser. I asked him to come document field damage caused by vehicles. Fourth call, Victor Slade. He answered, sounding confident, energetic, like a man running a successful event. I introduced myself as the owner of the field his parking operation was using. Then I gave him one chance. Stop parking immediately. Remove every vehicle. Restore my gate. Meet me at the property within 30 minutes to discuss restitution. I also informed him the sheriff, a towing company, and an appraiser were already on the way. 30 minutes, I said. Then I hung up. Victor never showed. Instead, he tried managing the problem with phone calls the way people do when they believe problems can still be controlled. But once certain wheels start turning, they don't stop. The sheriff's deputy arrived at 11:40. I showed him my deed, photos of my lock gate from earlier that week, and the HOA website advertisement promoting festival parking complete with a map labeling my hay field as overflow parking. The deputy walked the field, spoke to the parking attendant. Then he called Victor. The conversation was short. Victor admitted he had arranged the parking and admitted he had no written permission from the property owner. Them in trespass. Cash collection stopped immediately, but the cars were still there. 114 of them. At 12:23, I closed and locked my gate. At 1:05, the tow trucks arrived. For trucks moving slowly across the grass like giant mechanical insects. Lift, hook, pull, repeat. 114 times. Private property tow rate in Greenville County, $185 per vehicle. Do the math. About $21,000. And every car owner who wanted their vehicle back had to pay it. Around 2:15 that afternoon, Victor finally arrived. He walked toward the field in trance, slowly, eyes moving across the scene. Tow trucks. Angry festival visitors. Empty spaces where cars used to sit. He stopped beside me near the gate. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said. I told him I was sure his attorney would have an explanation. He asked if we could stop the towing and work something out. I handed him Gerald's phone number. Your lawyer can start there Monday morning. Then I walked back toward the house. The next few weeks unfolded exactly the way 30 years of property law predicted they would. The appraiser documented $14,000 in damage to my hay field. Gerald filed a civil complaint. And here's the twist Victor never saw coming. 31 of the car owners filed lawsuits against the HOA because they paid $20 to park, then paid $185 to retrieve their cars after the HOA falsely claimed the parking was authorized. 31 lawsuits. Same evidence. Same mistake. The HOA's insurance company quickly realized what they were facing. One main case, plus 31 additional claims. Settlement negotiations began within weeks. By the time everything was resolved, the HOA had paid. Full restoration of my field. Legal fees. Damages for unauthorized commercial use of my land. And reimbursement to every vehicle owner who had been towed. Victor's parking idea ended up costing the community more money than any project in Palmetto Ridge's history. For months later, the residents voted him out as HOA president. Turns out homeowners don't like higher dues when they're paying for someone else's bad decisions. The new board president called me personally after the election. She assured me the HOA now had a property attorney reviewing every decision involving land. We both laughed because the lesson had already been learned. My hay field was reseeded that fall. By spring, it looked like nothing had ever happened. Green rows of grass swaying in the wind. Sometimes I stand at the edge of that field in the mornings and think about that Saturday, the orange cones, the folding table demand, collecting $20 bills from strangers. $3,000 they made that morning. $3,000. But the real cost of that mistake turned out to be far higher. Here's the thing 30 years in property law taught me. People often confuse open space with permission. They see unused land and assume nobody will mind. But land always belongs to someone. And when that ownership is clear, the law doesn't hesitate. Some people think the tow trucks were harsh, but they weren't revenge. They were accountability. Without them, the story would have ended with excuses, because sometimes the only way to prove a boundary exists is to enforce it. Now the field is quiet again. The gate gets locked every night. The hay grows exactly the way it's supposed to. And if anyone ever drives past that field and thinks about using it for something creative, well, I still have Gerald on speed dial and the towing company's number saved in my phone. Some lessons are expensive, but they tend to last. Now I'm curious about something. If someone used your land without permission, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have tried to settle it quietly first? Because there's a fine line between patience and letting someone walk all over what's yours. Tell me what you think, and if you've ever had a neighbor, HOA, or business try to treat your property like their opportunity. I'd honestly like to hear how that turned out for you.